Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey, not into the flashy, acrobatic world of cinematic assassins, but deep into the grim, often mundane reality behind one of Japan's most enduring legends. Imagine this. It's the dead of night in feudal Japan. The air is cold and damp, and the only sounds are the distant croaking of frogs and the rustle of wind through bamboo. You're not wearing a sleek black suit, nor are you performing gravity-defying leaps across rooftops. Instead, you're dressed in the drab, patched clothes of a peasant, perhaps with a straw hat pulled low, moving slowly, painstakingly, through muddy fields, your senses straining for any sign of a watchful guard. This isn't the glorious pursuit of shadowy justice. It's a life of profound discomfort, constant paranoia, and the chilling proximity of brutal death. You probably won't survive this without getting publicly tortured or simply vanishing without a trace. But we're going to dive into the terrible truth about ninjas in feudal Japan. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling adventurous, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you guys are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported back to the Sengoku period, Japan's Warring States era, roughly from the mid-15th to the early 17th century. This was a time of ceaseless conflict, powerful daimyo feudal lords constantly vying for control, and a desperate need for intelligence, sabotage, and unconventional warfare. It was in this brutal crucible that the ninja, or more accurately, the shinobi, emerged. The popular image of a ninja is one of a superhuman assassin, effortlessly blending into shadows, wielding exotic weapons, and possessing mystical powers. But the reality was far grittier, far more desperate, and utterly lacking in glamour. Your life is not one of daring adventure, but of grinding tedium, constant fear, and profound isolation. The romanticized image of the lone, hooded figure, a master of stealth and a lethal combatant, is largely a modern invention, heavily influenced by Edo period folklore and later pop culture. In the feudal Japanese world, true stealth was a painstaking art. Technology was limited, and personal combat, while deadly, was rarely the elegant dance of cinematic portrayals. Your tools are simple, often improvised from farm implements. Your methods rely more on deception and patience than on impossible feats, and your chances of a clean, unnoticed kill, let alone a clean escape, are slim to none. One mainstream historical fact that completely shatters the myth of the master assassin in black pajamas is that historical shinobi were primarily intelligence gatherers, spies, saboteurs, and unconventional warfare specialists, often recruited from peasant or low-ranking samurai classes in remote regions, using mundane disguises and relying on practical skills in infiltration, reconnaissance, and survival rather than mystical abilities or direct assassination in dramatic fashion. Their effectiveness lay in their subtlety and ability to gather information, not in being flashy fighters. Think about it. Your primary job is essentially spying, not swinging from rooftops, a particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the pragmatic, and often desperate, origins of the shinobi is their close connection to various religious ascetic groups, particularly Buddhist monks like the Yamabushi or mountain ascetics. These groups, living in remote mountain strongholds, developed extensive knowledge of terrain, survival skills, and guerrilla tactics, which later became associated with shinobi activities. Imagine your local spiritual leaders also being masters of espionage and sabotage, blurring the lines between piety and covert operations. Historians still argue whether the exaggerated and often supernatural abilities attributed to ninjas in later Edo period tales and folklore were primarily propaganda, spread by the shinobi themselves or their employers to instill fear in their enemies, or if they were largely embellished stories created by outsiders who simply couldn't comprehend the shinobi's mundane yet effective methods of stealth and deception in a world without modern technology. Was it clever self-promotion or baffled misunderstanding that birthed the ninja legend? As you begin your grim career, you quickly realize that life is less about glory and more about sheer survival. Your targets are not always evil tyrants. They might be rival daimyo for whom your lord has a grudge, or a fort you need to scout, or a supply line you need to disrupt. The morality of your actions, if you ever considered it, quickly gets subsumed by the cold imperative of the mission and the constant threat to your own existence, the silence of the night. Once a time for rest, now becomes your battleground. Every rustle in the bamboo, every distant dog bark, every shadowed doorway could conceal a guard, a samurai patrol, or a hidden threat. Your senses are perpetually heightened, your nerves frayed, constantly searching for openings, for vulnerabilities, and for escape routes. The very air seems to crackle with tension, a perpetual hum of danger that never truly leaves you, even in moments of stillness. And you are utterly, terrifyingly alone in this grim endeavor. Having been introduced to the terrifying, shadowy world of the shinobi, you might be imagining a mystical, ancient warrior cult, born solely for assassination. But the terrible truth behind their origins is far more humble, far more pragmatic, and deeply rooted in the harsh realities of feudal Japanese life. Origins farmers, not assassins. Forget the elite, specialized killers of legend. The earliest shinobi were often ordinary peasants, dispossessed samurai, or local villagers who, out of desperation or necessity, developed specialized skills in intelligence gathering, infiltration, and survival, using their intimate knowledge of the land to aid local lords in unconventional warfare. You quickly learn that your journey into this shadowy profession began not in a secret dojo, but often in a muddy rice field, or a quiet, rural village, born from the very desperation of constant conflict. It's like discovering that your favorite Special Forces operative started out as a very resourceful, very sneaky farmer, and his first mission was probably just finding out what the lord in the next valley was up to. You find yourself in a remote, mountainous region of Japan, perhaps Iga or Koga province, far from the grand castles and well-traveled roads. The landscape is rugged, covered in dense forests, hidden valleys, and treacherous paths. Here, where central authority was weak and powerful, daimyo feudal lords constantly clashed. Local villagers and minor clans learned to survive by their wits. Your hands, accustomed to holding a hoe, might now be subtly trained in climbing or tracking. Your movements, usually for working the land, are now honed for silent traversal. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the widespread myth of ninjas as an ancient, distinct, and highly specialized warrior class from the outset is that the earliest shinobi were not primarily professional assassins, but largely individuals or groups often from peasant, ronin masterless samurai, or jizamurai local gentry backgrounds who developed skills in covert warfare, reconnaissance, and survival in areas prone to conflict, serving as local intelligence gatherers, scouts, and irregular combatants for feudal lords. Their primary value was information, not outright murder. Think about it. Your idea of a deadly spy used to be someone who just listened really well and knew how to avoid getting caught in a pigsty. Imagine the pressures that led to these origins. Your village might be caught between two warring daimyo, constantly raided for resources, or threatened with annexation. Traditional samurai warfare, with its strict codes of honor and open battles, offered little protection to the common people. Out of necessity, local communities and their leaders began to develop and utilize unconventional tactics, gathering intelligence on enemy movements, infiltrating rival strongholds to spread disinformation or sabotage supplies, and employing guerrilla warfare to harass larger, just more conventional forces. These were the nascent skills of the shinobi. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects this humble beginning is the shinobi's intimate knowledge of the natural environment and local peasant life, often using this to their advantage. They might hide in plain sight as farmers, blend into the landscape, or utilize their knowledge of local flora and fauna for survival, camouflage, or even creating rudimentary traps. Imagine a master of espionage who can tell you the best way to plant rice, or exactly which mushroom will give you a stomachache, all as part of his tradecraft. Historians still argue whether the shinobi's development of unconventional warfare tactics was primarily an organic response by marginalized rural communities and local gentry, desperate to defend themselves against larger, more powerful samurai armies, developing skills out of sheer necessity and a rejection of traditional samurai codes, or if it was predominantly a deliberate cultivation by certain daimyo who recognized the strategic value of covert operations and actively fostered shinobi groups as specialized military assets, pushing them to develop new techniques beyond traditional warfare. Was it grassroots survival or top-down strategy that birthed the ninja? Your tools, far from specialized ninja gear, were often improvised from everyday farm implements. A hoe could become a weapon or a climbing tool. A sickle could be used for combat or cutting rope. Your knowledge of local dialects, peasant customs, and the terrain from a lifetime of farming or hunting was your greatest asset for blending in and gathering intelligence. You looked like everyone else. Precisely so, no one would suspect you. The early missions were likely focused on reconnaissance, infiltrating a rival village to count their soldiers, assessing their defenses, or observing their supply lines. You might pose as a traveling merchant, a wandering monk. Remember those Yamabushi monks we touched on in the intro, or a simple peasant, gathering information through casual conversation, careful observation, and often extensive patience. Direct assassination, while it occurred, was less common than later myths suggest. Information was often more valuable than a dead enemy. The dangers were immense. Discovery meant immediate capture. Brutal torture, recall those grim realities from What Happened If You Were a Criminal in Medieval Times. Section 8. And a swift, agonizing death. Often as a public example, trust was a luxury rarely afforded, and every interaction, even with seemingly friendly locals, was a potential risk. Your life was consumed by constant vigilance, disguise, and the perpetual fear of being exposed. You feel the rough fabric of your peasant clothes against your skin, the mud squelching under your straw sandals, and the profound, chilling awareness that your seemingly ordinary life masks a dangerous, hidden purpose. You learn to move silently through the night, to observe without being seen, and to carry vital information that could determine the fate of your village or your lord. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about magical powers or flashy outfits. It's about their humble, brutal origins. Your life as an early shinobi is a continuous struggle for survival and a desperate pursuit of intelligence, transforming your peasant existence into a shadowy apprenticeship in unconventional warfare, ensuring that the legendary stealth and cunning of the ninja were forged not in mystical temples, but in the gritty, unforgiving reality of feudal Japan's battlefields and desperate villages. Having understood the humble, pragmatic origins of the shinobi in the harsh realities of peasant life, your journey into their world next confronts the brutal foundation of their effectiveness. Training hardship, not magic. Forget mystical incantations, secret scrolls, or effortless mastery of superhuman feats. Your apprenticeship in the art of covert warfare is a relentless, all-encompassing conditioning process designed to strip away your former self, harden your body into a tool of endurance, and sharpen your mind into an instrument of cold precision, forcing you to endure unimaginable physical pain and psychological manipulation. You quickly learn that survival here depends not on inherent talent, but on unwavering discipline, and that every ache, every fear, is just another step in forging you into a silent, deadly instrument, ready to vanish into the shadows. It's like being forced into a perpetual, extreme boot camp, where your instructors are ruthless, the environment unforgiving, and the final exam is a matter of life and death. You are no longer just a farmer or a dispossessed samurai. You are a trainee, one of many, within a secluded, often grim, training ground. This might be a hidden mountain stronghold in Aiga or Koga. Remember those regions from Section 2, a secluded manor house, or even a cell-like dwelling beneath a seemingly ordinary village. The days are long, arduous, and monotonous, filled with constant drills, exercises, and lessons that push your physical and mental limits far beyond what you thought possible. The air, wherever you are, is thick with the scent of sweat, exertion, and the faint, lingering metallic tang of crude steel. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contradicts the idea of ninjas as naturally gifted or magically imbued beings is that historical shinobi underwent extensive and brutal training regimens that encompassed not only rigorous physical conditioning and martial arts with various weapons, but also specialized skills like stealth, disguise, infiltration, survival in harsh environments, and often intense mental and psychological conditioning to instill discipline and unwavering loyalty. This comprehensive and harsh training transformed ordinary individuals into highly effective, albeit specialized, covert operatives. Think about it. Becoming a silent, deadly shadow takes a lot more than just looking cool in a black outfit. Imagine your physical conditioning. Your body, perhaps previously accustomed to agricultural labor or basic samurai training, is systematically broken down and rebuilt, stripped of all weakness. Endless hours are spent running through dense forests, climbing sheer rock faces, enduring hunger and thirst, and practicing feats of agility over treacherous terrain. You learn to move silently, to navigate difficult landscapes in the dark, and to scale walls or overcome obstacles with minimal sound. Your muscles scream with exhaustion. Your hands are raw and calloused, and your entire body is a symphony of aches and pains. This isn't just about strength, it's about endurance, agility, and turning your body into a precise, efficient, and resilient extension of your will. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the extreme nature of some of this training, particularly for groups like the Yamabushi mountain ascetics, who sometimes influenced shinobi practices, is the alleged use of sensory deprivation, extreme fasting, or exposure to harsh elements like prolonged immersion in cold water to toughen the body and mind. This brutal conditioning was believed to increase resilience, sharpen senses, and prepare individuals for extreme hardship. Imagine being forced to sit motionless in a freezing mountain stream for hours, just to test your endurance and mental fortitude, knowing it's part of your training to become a stealthy operative. Historians still argue whether the extreme physical and psychological conditioning described in later legends and some historical accounts of shinobi training was primarily based on genuine historical practices, reflecting sophisticated if brutal methods of mental and physical control, or if these narratives were largely exaggerated and embellished, intended to heighten the mystique and terror surrounding ninjas by attributing superhuman qualities to their practical, albeit effective, skills. Was it intense physical discipline, or later storytelling, that shaped their terrifying reputation? Martial arts training is central. But unlike the samurai's emphasis on honorable open combat, your training focuses on efficiency, lethality, and surprise. You learn to fight with various weapons: the short sword ninjato or katana, daggers tanto, garrotes, and improvised tools which we'll explore more in Section 5. The training is hands-on, brutal, and utterly focused on lethal force and quick dispatch. You learn to strike quickly, silently, and with devastating precision, aiming for vital points. Disarming techniques, grappling, and silent takedowns are drilled into you until they become second nature. Sparring is intense, often leaving you bruised and bleeding. But each injury is a grim lesson, a step towards perfecting your deadly craft in close quarters. Beyond physical prowess, mental conditioning is equally important. You're taught rigorous discipline in observation, memory, and deduction. You learn to study targets, to understand their routines, their weaknesses, and their vulnerabilities. You're trained in the art of disguise and infiltration, which we'll explore in the next section, learning to blend into different environments and social strata. You might be taught to mimic different dialects or adopt various mannerisms, all designed to make you invisible until the precise moment to act. You are drilled in information gathering, surveillance, and code breaking. For information is your most valuable asset. The psychological manipulation is constant. You are stripped of your past identity. Your old loyalties are challenged, and a new identity is forged. One of unwavering obedience to your master and your mission. You are taught to suppress emotion, to become detached from your actions, turning you into a more effective, less hesitant killer. This indoctrination, combined with the brutal physical training, creates a formidable, often cold, instrument of covert warfare. You feel the burning in your muscles, the dull ache in your joints, and the constant mental exhaustion that comes from perpetual vigilance and relentless learning. You execute drills flawlessly, your movements becoming fluid and instinctive, but inside, you feel a profound shift, a hardening of your own spirit, a slow erosion of who you once were. The awful truth about a ninja's life isn't about natural talent. It's about the grueling training, a brutal, all-encompassing conditioning process that breaks your body and reshapes your mind, transforming you into a disciplined, lethal, and utterly ruthless weapon, ready to disappear into the shadows and carry out your deadly mission without question. A chilling testament to the price of effective, invisible warfare in feudal Japan, with your body honed and your mind conditioned by brutal training. Your apprenticeship as a shinobi moves from the secluded harshness of the dojo to the perilous art of deception. Disguise ordinary appearance. Forget the iconic, sleek black suits and gravity-defying leaps of pop culture ninjas. In feudal Japan, your most crucial skill was not flashy combat, but the painstaking ability to blend seamlessly into the everyday fabric of society, posing as a common farmer, merchant, monk, or performer. You quickly learn that your deadliest weapon isn't your blade, but your ability to become utterly invisible by becoming utterly ordinary, and that every casual conversation or unnoticed door is a high-stakes gamble where a single wrong word or gesture could lead to immediate discovery and a brutal end. It's like being a perpetual actor in a play where a bad performance means you get publicly executed, and every audience member is a potential critic. You're no longer in a remote mountain stronghold. You're on the bustling streets of a medieval Japanese city, or perhaps a quiet rural village. The air is thick with the sounds and smells of daily life, the chatter of merchants, the distant cries of street vendors, the earthy scent of rice fields, or the aroma of simmering stew from a nearby inn. You might be dressed in the drab, patched clothes of a peasant, a simple straw hat pulled low over your face, or perhaps you're posing as a wandering monk, your head shaved, your robes unassuming. Your new identity isn't just about the clothes you wear. It's about every subtle nuance of your gait, your accent, your mannerisms, all meticulously practiced during your grueling training. One mainstream historical fact that completely shatters the myth of the ninja in black is that historical shinobi rarely wore distinctive ninja costumes, but instead relied on mundane disguises, posing as commoners like merchants, farmers, monks, peddlers, or even entertainers, to blend seamlessly into various social strata and infiltrate enemy territories without drawing suspicion. Their effectiveness depended on being inconspicuous, not eye-catching. Think about it, the best way to get past a guard is to look exactly like the person who belongs there, doing a very boring, normal thing. Imagine the painstaking details. Your clothing isn't just a costume. It's meticulously weathered, stained, and subtly altered to reflect your chosen persona, right down to the dust on your straw sandals or the rough texture of your patched tunic. If you're posing as a monk, you ensure your head is cleanly shaven, your robes are appropriate for the sect, and your prayer beads are visibly carried. You study the local dialect, practicing its inflections, slang, and common idioms, knowing that a single misplaced word or an unusual turn of phrase could betray your origins. You observe the daily routines of the people you're meant to blend with, how they greet each other, how they conduct business, how they eat, how they carry themselves. Every detail must be perfect, because a single inconsistency, a moment of unfamiliarity, could be noticed by a watchful guard, a suspicious local, or even a rival spy. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the extreme lengths shinobi went to for convincing disguise and their occasional, grim successes is the alleged practice of injuring themselves in specific, minor ways, like creating a limp or a permanent cough to make their adopted persona more believable, particularly if they were posing as someone who had suffered hardship. Imagine deliberately giving yourself a limp, or practicing a convincing cough, just to make your cover story more authentic, knowing that these injuries might actually become real physical ailments over time. Historians still argue whether the shinobi's mastery of disguise and social infiltration was primarily due to extensive psychological training and natural talent for acting, allowing them to truly embody various personas and overcome the significant challenges of medieval social mobility and regional distinctions, or if it was also a reflection of an exaggerated mystique created by later legends, where their mundane but effective methods were simply misinterpreted as superhuman feats by outsiders who couldn't comprehend their subtle tradecraft. Was it about profound acting skill or simply clever observation that made them so elusive? Gaining access to your target's inner circle or a heavily guarded stronghold is the true peril. You can't simply sneak in through the main gate or perform a dramatic aerial entry. Instead, you must become part of the legitimate flow, perhaps posing as a new servant, a traveling merchant seeking an audience, a wandering artisan offering services, a religious pilgrim, or even a desperate beggar. This means spending days, or even weeks, cultivating trust, listening for vulnerabilities, or waiting for a key opportunity like a public festival, a large delivery, or a temporary lapse in security. Every conversation with a guard, every interaction with a servant, is a chance to gather information, to build a connection, or to inadvertently trigger suspicion. The constant risk of being recognized, of your true identity being questioned, is immense. A guard might ask a probing question you're not prepared for, testing your knowledge of local customs, a former acquaintance from your true life if you remember it. Given the identity loss we'll discuss later in Section 9 might unexpectedly cross your path, a moment of clumsiness, a slip of a fabricated detail, or even a sudden, uncharacteristic reaction to a normal event, and your carefully constructed persona could shatter, leading to immediate discovery, brutal capture, agonizing interrogation. Recall that grim reality from How a Medieval Assassin's Life Sucked, Section 8, and a very public, humiliating death. You live in a state of perpetual vigilance, your nerves frayed, your mind constantly racing, analyzing every interaction, every reaction, every subtle cue from those around you. Every casual glance from a passerby feels like a threat. Every seemingly benign conversation, a potential interrogation. You suppress your true self, your thoughts, your emotions, burying them deep beneath the layers of your assumed identity. This constant deception, this relentless performance of a lie, is mentally exhausting, transforming your very being into a fragile, meticulously crafted fabrication that constantly threatens to unravel. You feel the clammy sweat on your palms, the quickening of your breath as a guard's eye lingers on you, and the profound, terrifying realization that your life hangs by the thinnest thread of your own performance. You maintain your stoic peasant face, offering a polite, unremarkable nod, knowing that your survival depends on remaining utterly, completely ordinary until the moment you choose to strike. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about flashy black suits or magical abilities. It's about the brutal, relentless reality of disguise and infiltration. Your existence is a constant, high-stakes charade, where every step you take, every word you speak, is a gamble against discovery, forcing you to live as a nameless ghost, perpetually blending into the background, waiting for the one moment to act, and praying you can vanish without a trace. With your ordinary appearance, a meticulously crafted shield, and your mind a steel trap for observation, your tools for the grim task ahead are far from the gleaming, specialized implements of the samurai or the high-tech gadgets of modern spies. Instead, you rely on weaponry farm tools, not katanas. Forget the iconic, razor-sharp katana or the flashy shuriken of popular myth. In feudal Japan, the shinobi's most effective instruments were often practical, mundane objects, improvised from everyday farm implements or disguised as harmless tools, demanding ingenuity and a chilling mastery of lethal force in close quarters. You quickly learn that your deadliest weapon isn't a sword of honor, but a farmer's sickle, a humble hoe, or a simple length of rope. transformed by your deadly intent, meant to strike swiftly, silently, and with brutal, often untraceable, finality. It's like being a very resourceful handyman, but all your tools are secretly designed for killing, and your repair job is usually a fatal one. You run your thumb over the cold, sharpened edge of a kama, a small, curved sickle, its wooden handle worn smooth by countless hours of use, perhaps in a rice field. It's an unassuming tool, common among peasants, making it easily concealable and attracting no suspicion. Yet, in your trained hands, its sharp blade can sever arteries, its hooked tip can entangle an opponent, and its very ordinariness makes it a terrifyingly effective weapon for a surprise attack. This isn't for open combat, it's for close quarters, desperate, and often messy work. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the widespread myth of ninjas wielding specialized, exotic ninja weaponry is that historical shinobi primarily utilized modified farm tools, common household implements, and simple, easily concealed weapons like daggers, sickles, hoes, or lengths of rope, prioritizing practicality, improvisation, and the ability to blend in over flashy, recognizable martial arts weapons like the samurai's katana. Their arsenal reflected their origins as common folk and their need for discretion. Think about it. Your deadliest weapon is something you could use to harvest vegetables. Imagine the training you endured with these seemingly mundane objects. Hours spent practicing precise strikes with a kama, turning its agricultural motions into lethal combat techniques. You learned how to use a hokuwa not just for tilling soil, but for delivering crushing blows or tripping an opponent. A simple wooden staff bow became a formidable defensive and offensive tool, capable of deflecting sword strikes or breaking bones. You learned to maximize damage with minimal effort, to strike quickly, silently, and with devastating precision, aiming for vital points or vulnerable areas in unarmored targets, a particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the shinobi's ingenuity and their aversion to direct, honorable combat associated with samurai is their occasional use of caltrops, tetsubishi, small spiked devices that were scattered on the ground to injure the feet of pursuers, both humans and horses, or of smoke bombs, metsubushi made from ashes. Ground pepper, or other irritants, used not for dramatic disappearances, but for temporary distraction and disorientation to facilitate escape. Imagine throwing a handful of ground chili powder in a guard's face to get away, or scattering thorny pieces of metal on the ground to slow down your pursuers, relying on pain and distraction rather than fancy martial arts. Historians still argue whether the shinobi's emphasis on unconventional weaponry and pragmatic tools, rather than the samurai's specialized and ornate blades, primarily reflected a class distinction and their non-adherence to samurai codes of honor, as they were often from lower social strata, or if it was predominantly a strategic necessity for their covert operations, where blending in and using readily available, non-suspicious items was paramount for effective infiltration and escape. Was it about social class or practical necessity that defined their unique arsenal beyond improvised farm tools? Other common, easily concealable weapons were favored. A small, sharp dagger tanto was essential for close-quarters kills or for cutting ropes and locks. A length of rope could be used for silent strangulation, tying up victims, or as a climbing aid. Simple throwing needles, bow shuriken, or shaken, or small. Sharp stones could be used for distraction or to inflict minor, debilitating injuries from a distance, never for a fatal strike as often depicted in myths. Poison. As with medieval assassins, remember that poison's peril, from How a medieval assassin's life sucked. Section 12 was also a part of the arsenal, allowing for discreet kills that were difficult to trace. The emphasis was always on surprise, speed, and discretion. Your weapon was not meant for a prolonged, honorable duel with a samurai. It was meant for a swift, decisive strike on an unsuspecting target, allowing you to vanish before alarm could be raised. Your training focused on exploiting vulnerabilities, on silent movement, and on using the environment to your advantage. The intimate nature of your chosen weapons underscores the brutal reality of your profession. Assassination, infiltration, and sabotage are not remote. They are intensely personal. You must get close to your target, close enough for your concealed tool to find its mark. This proximity adds another layer of psychological burden to your already miserable existence. Your hands, the very hands that might have tilled soil, are now trained to be lethally precise instruments of death, transforming everyday objects into terrifying tools of your grim trade. You feel the cold, sharp edge of the kama in your hand, a chilling reminder of its dual purpose. You imagine the swift, silent action, the sudden end to a life, achieved not with a glorious katana, but with a humble farm implement. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about exotic, flashy weaponry. It's about the brutal, practical reality of their tools. Your arsenal is designed for intimacy and lethality, turning every mission into a hands-on act of violence or sabotage, ensuring that your existence is forever defined by the cold, silent precision of your deadly craft, leaving you forever marked by the mundane objects transformed by your ruthless intent, often leaving no trace of the ninja behind, only the ordinary tool. With your ordinary appearance, a perfect shield, and your improvised farm tools sharpened for lethal use, your understanding of the shinobi's purpose now clarifies mission spying. Sabotage. Forget the romanticized singular act of a dramatic assassination. The true strength and ubiquitous employment of ninjas in feudal Japan lay in their mundane, yet utterly vital, roles as intelligence gatherers, infiltrators, and saboteurs, quietly undermining enemy forces from within. You quickly learn that your deadliest impact is often achieved not through a direct kill, but through information, confusion, and subtle destruction, turning covert operations into a game of patience, deception, and meticulous planning. Far removed from any flashy combat, it's like being a very quiet, very effective corporate spy. But instead of stealing trade secrets, you're stealing battle plans or setting fire to enemy supply lines. And failure means a very public, painful death. You receive your assignment, perhaps a whispered command from your lord, or a coded message from your jonin leader. The target isn't always a person to be killed, but a castle to be infiltrated, an army to be observed, or a supply depot to be destroyed. The air around you is thick with the weight of unseen information, the potential for quiet chaos. Your skills, honed by brutal training, remember that from Section 3, are now put to their true, practical use. One mainstream historical fact that utterly redefines the ninja's primary purpose is that historical shinobi's core missions were extensive intelligence gathering, spying, reconnaissance, infiltration, to gather information or sow discord, counterintelligence, and acts of sabotage is setting fires, contaminating water food, disrupting supply lines, rather than routine direct assassinations, which were far rarer and riskier. Their value lay in information and covert disruption, crucial for lords in the Sengoku period's constant warfare. Think about it. Your idea of a thrilling mission involves crawling through sewage to count enemy soldiers. Imagine a reconnaissance mission. You might spend days, even weeks, living undercover near an enemy castle. Remember that disguise ordinary appearance from Section 4, posing as a farmer, a merchant, or a wandering monk. Your objective is to meticulously observe counting the number of guards, noting their patrol patterns, identifying weak points in the fortifications, assessing troop movements outside the walls, and listening to local gossip for any vital intelligence. Your tools are not just weapons. They are observation skills, memory, and the ability to disappear into the background. Every detail gathered, however small, contributes to your lord's strategic advantage. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the shinobi's resourcefulness and their unique blend of mundane and dangerous skills is the alleged use of specialized tools for listening. Some historical texts mention devices resembling large, cupped ears or hollow tubes, used to amplify distant sounds or listen through thin walls, allowing them to eavesdrop on conversations in enemy compounds. Imagine having a giant ear trumpet designed specifically for spying on your enemy's secret meetings, allowing you to literally hear hidden plots unfold from a distance. Historians still argue whether the shinobi's apparent reluctance for overt direct assassination compared to their portrayal in later myths was primarily a pragmatic strategic choice, as gathering intelligence or sowing chaos often yielded greater long-term benefits for their employers than a single risky kill, which could provoke immediate retaliation, or if it also reflected a subtle distinction between their clandestine warfare and the samurai's honorable and public combat, aligning with their origins outside the traditional warrior class. Was it about efficiency or cultural distinction that made them prefer spying to killing? Infiltration is another core mission. This isn't about dramatic entry. It's about patience and exploiting vulnerabilities. You might pose as a new servant to gain access to a noble's household, or a peddler to get inside a fortified town. Once inside, your goal is rarely immediate violence. Instead, you might search for secret documents, plant disinformation, or simply learn the layout of the castle for a future attack. The process is slow, painstaking, and filled with constant risk, as any misstep could lead to your capture and brutal interrogation, which we'll explore in Section 8. Sabotage missions were crucial. You might be tasked with setting fire to an enemy's food stores, contaminating their water supply, a grim reminder of those Roman and Egyptian dangers, destroying their siege engines like those from Why Building a Castle Sucked. Section 15, or disrupting their communications. These acts, while less direct than assassination, could have devastating strategic impacts, crippling an enemy force without direct confrontation. A simple fire in a granary could starve an army. Counterintelligence was also vital. You might be tasked with uncovering enemy spies, identifying traitors within your own lord's ranks, or spreading false information to deceive rivals. This required immense cunning, the ability to read subtle cues, and a profound understanding of human nature. Your life is consumed by these hidden tasks. You spend long hours in uncomfortable hiding spots, patiently observing. You endure hunger, cold, and constant fear. Remember that constant paranoia from Joseon, Korea. Section 8, or Isolation Trust. No one from A Medieval Assassin's Life Sucked. Section 9. You are a tool, a nameless shadow, whose success is often measured by how little evidence you leave behind, and how completely your presence is erased. You feel the cold dread of waiting in the dark, the sharp focus required to interpret every sound, every shadow, and the profound weight of the information you carry. You complete your mission, perhaps setting a quiet fire, or slipping a coded message into a hidden compartment, and then you melt back into the darkness. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about dramatic assassinations. It's about the brutal reality of their missions. Your life is consumed by the relentless, hidden toil of spying, sabotage, and infiltration, transforming your existence into a perpetual act of unseen warfare, ensuring that the legendary stealth and cunning of the ninja were forged not in mystical combat, but in the painstaking, often mundane, and utterly dangerous execution of covert operations, constantly lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, not with a katana, but with a whisper, a fire, or a stolen plan. With your missions now clearly understood as a web of spying and sabotage, your execution of these tasks hinges on the most celebrated, yet often misunderstood shinobi skill, stealth slow, painstaking. Forget the lightning-fast, gravity-defying maneuvers of fiction. In feudal Japan, true infiltration was a meticulous, agonizingly slow process, relying on endless patience, acute observation, and the exploitation of every tiny crack in a target's defenses, often requiring hours of agonizingly slow movement through filth and darkness. You quickly learn that invisibility isn't achieved through magic, but through profound stillness, precise timing, and a willingness to become utterly, incredibly, boringly unnoticeable, turning every inch of progress into a grueling test of discipline. It's like being forced to complete a highly complex, very important, and extremely slow-motion obstacle course, where any quick movement means you immediately fail, and the consequences are brutal. You're at the perimeter of an enemy castle or a fortified manor house, perhaps under the cover of a moonless night. The air is cold and damp, carrying the scent of damp earth, distant cooking fires, and the faint, unsettling smell of animal waste from the nearby moat or stables. Your black attire, far from being a sleek uniform. Remember that disguise ordinary appearance from Section 4. You'd wear dark, drab work clothes, not a costume, blends into the night, but it does not make you truly invisible. Your senses are hyper-alert, straining to hear every distant dog bark, every shift of a guard's weight, every rustle of the wind through the trees. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the myth of instantaneous ninja, vanishes, or superhuman agility is that historical shinobi achieved stealth through meticulous, agonizingly slow movement, exploiting shadows, distractions, and the enemy's routines, often spending hours or even an entire night to cover a short distance, and relying on patience, acute observation, and knowledge of the terrain rather than impossible speed or acrobatics. Their effectiveness in stealth was a triumph of extreme discipline and realistic tactics. Think about it. Your idea of a quick infiltration involves spending 3 hours crawling through a ditch. Imagine the agonizing slowness. You move not by running, but by creeping, inch by painstaking inch. You might spend 10 minutes simply observing a single patch of shadow, waiting for a guard's back to turn, or for the distant flicker of his lantern to pass. You learn to move with the wind, to breathe silently, to place each footfall with exquisite precision, avoiding loose pebbles or snapping twigs. A single misplaced step, a subtle rustle of your clothing, a moment of impatience, and the silence of the night is shattered, triggering an alarm, and potentially your swift discovery. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the shinobi's mundane but vital ingenuity and stealth is the alleged use of specialized tools for silent entry. While shuriken or throwing stars were not commonly used for direct combat, modified versions, or other small, sharp objects might be used to silently create tiny holes in paper screens shoji to observe a room, or to cut threads on a door. Other tools included quiet grappling hooks made of soft rope and muted metal, or specialized footwear designed to reduce sound. Imagine needing a silent pickaxe just to get through a wall without making a sound, and knowing that one wrong tap means you're caught. Historians still argue whether the shinobi's legendary ability to seemingly disappear or move unseen was primarily due to their actual mastery of extreme physical stealth and highly disciplined movement, making them genuinely difficult to detect, or if it was also a psychological phenomenon, where their reputation for supernatural abilities fueled by rumor and their employers made witnesses simply believe they saw less than what was actually there, blurring reality with fear. Was it actual skill, or the power of reputation, that made them so hard to spot? Navigating the environment is treacherous. Moats, often filled with stagnant water, refuse, or sometimes even sharpened stakes, must be crossed silently. Walls, rough stone or slippery wood, must be scaled, hand over agonizing hand, your body pressed flat against the surface, every muscle straining to prevent a sound. You might move through muddy ditches, through dense, thorny bushes, or over fragile rooftops, each environment presenting its own unique challenge for silent passage. The pervasive smell of filth from the moat, from nearby refuse, clings to you, a grim constant. The threat of discovery is ever present. A distant dog might bark, its sharp sound echoing through the night. A guard might turn unexpectedly, his lantern beam sweeping across your hiding spot. A fellow shinobi on your team might make a mistake, drawing attention, forcing you to freeze, utterly motionless, for agonizing minutes, your heart pounding in your chest, your breath held, hoping you remain unseen. The psychological toll is immense. The extreme patience required, the relentless focus on every single sound and movement, the constant fear of detection, all combine to fray your nerves. Your mind is a perpetual battlefield, fighting against impatience, against fear, against the burning desire to simply move faster. You're constantly on edge, your senses strained to their breaking point, living in a state of hypervigilance that allows for no true relaxation, even after you've gained access, perhaps through a barely opened window or a subtle breach in the wall. The stealth continues. You creep through darkened corridors, along narrow beams, or through the rafters, your movements silent as a ghost, every creak of the wood, every shuffle of air, a potential betrayal. Your mission might require hours of patient waiting in a cramped, uncomfortable hiding spot, listening, observing, before you can finally act. You feel the cold dampness against your skin, the raw ache in your muscles from holding unnatural positions, and the profound, chilling terror of stillness. You place one foot precisely, slowly, feeling the ground beneath you, inching forward into the absolute darkness. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about dramatic combat. It's about the brutal reality of stealth. Your life is consumed by a meticulous, agonizingly slow process of infiltration, transforming every movement into a painstaking gamble against discovery, ensuring that the legendary invisibility of the shinobi was forged not in magic, but in relentless patience, profound discipline, and the terrifying willingness to become utterly unnoticeable, waiting silently in the shadows for the perfect, agonizingly slow moment to strike. Even if your painstaking stealth your perfected disguise, and your resourceful implements allowed you to complete your mission unnoticed, a terrible, almost inevitable. Fate still loomed for every shinobi capture, torture, and death. Forget noble last stands or quick, honorable demises. If you were caught, your life was instantly transformed into an agonizing, brutal interrogation, designed not just to punish you, but to extract every secret, every name, and every plan from your shattered mind, turning your body into an unwilling instrument of betrayal. You quickly learn that your only true escape from this grim destiny is to never be caught at all, because the feudal lord's justice, when it caught a ninja, was relentlessly cruel, ensuring a horrifying, public, and agonizing end. It's like falling into a trap designed by the most sadistic engineer imaginable, where every moment is filled with excruciating pain, and the goal is to break your will before your body finally gives out, all while surrounded by unfeeling captors. You stumble, perhaps exhausted from your infiltration, or perhaps cornered in a blind alley within the castle grounds. A sudden shout, the glint of steel, and then rough hands seize you. Samurai guards, their faces grim and unyielding beneath their helmets, swarm around you. The heavy weight of chains, the harsh glare of torches, and the triumphant shouts of your captors signal the abrupt, terrifying end of your mission, and likely, your life. You're swiftly stripped of your mundane disguise. Remember that ordinary peasant clothing from Section 4. Your concealed tools, those farm implements from Section 5, and any false identity you so meticulously cultivated. Your subsequent journey will likely be to a cold, damp, subterranean prison cell, far from the light of day, a temporary holding pen before the true torment begins, a place that reeked of human fear and despair. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines the grim fate of a captured shinobi is that captured shinobi were almost universally subjected to brutal and prolonged torture by feudal lords to extract intelligence about their employers. Daimyo, their organization's methods, and their network of spies, regardless of their actual guilt, with the ultimate outcome being a public and agonizing execution designed to deter others. The value of the information you possessed was immense, ensuring every effort would be made to break your will and make you talk. Think about it, your primary value, once caught, is the secrets you hold, and they will go to unimaginable lengths to pry them from you. Imagine the chamber you're brought to. It's likely a cold, stone-walled dungeon room, perpetually damp and utterly dark, illuminated only by the flickering light of a brazier or a few sputtering oil lamps. The air is thick with the metallic scent of old blood, the stench of unwashed bodies, and the cloying odor of human fear. Before you stand various instruments of pain, grotesque in their design, each meticulously crafted to inflict maximum suffering: wooden racks, bamboo splints, various clamps, and perhaps heavy stones. Your interrogators, often stern-faced samurai officials or ruthless torturers, watch impassively, their expressions unreadable, their purpose chillingly clear. Your torturer, perhaps a hardened veteran of countless interrogations, moves with an unsettling calm, his movements practiced, his focus absolute. They are not merely seeking truth, they are asserting the absolute power of the Lord, and your suffering is a tool in their arsenal. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the almost bureaucratic meticulousness and perverse ingenuity with which torture was sometimes applied in feudal Japan is the use of different named torture methods based on severity. The stone torture, ishizime, where heavy stones were placed on the victim's legs, or suspension by the thumbs or feet, were common. More agonizing might be the saw torture, nokogiribiki, where a wooden saw would be applied, or the dreaded water torture, forcing water into the victim's body. Imagine being systematically subjected to increasingly brutal methods, each with a specific name and purpose, designed to break you down one agonizing step at a time until you confessed. Historians still argue whether the widespread reliance on torture in feudal Japanese justice and for intelligence gathering from shinobi was primarily a practical method for extracting information in an era lacking modern investigative techniques. With the belief that only intense pain could break the will of hardened spies and reveal hidden conspiracies, or if it also served as a powerful tool of state terror and control, demonstrating absolute power over the individual's body and mind, regardless of the actual reliability of the confessions obtained, and deterring future defiance through sheer fear of such suffering. Was it about uncovering truth or exercising raw, terrifying power that made torture so prevalent? The interrogation begins, but it's not a conversation. It's a relentless barrage of questions, demanding the names of your masters, your fellow shinobi, your methods, and your plans. Each denial, each moment of resistance, is punctuated by escalating pain. Your limbs might be stretched on a rack, slowly dislocating your joints. Bamboo splints might be driven under your fingernails, or your fingers and toes might be systematically crushed by heavy weights. The pain is unimaginable, searing through your body, pushing you to the absolute limits of human endurance. You try to resist, to remember your training, the loyalty sworn to your organization, the knowledge that revealing secrets could compromise your entire network or condemn others to your same fate. But the agony is relentless, overwhelming, systematically dismantling your will, your mind, reeling from the pain, struggles to maintain coherence, to protect the secrets locked within. You hear your own cries, distorted, animalistic, echoing off the damp stone walls, utterly alone in your agony. You watch your body writhe, an unwilling puppet of your tormentors, desperately seeking a reprieve, any release from the unbearable suffering. You might confess to anything, implicate anyone, just to make the pain stop, sacrificing your loyalty for the brief, precious moments of cessation. If you finally confess, whether truthfully or, more likely, falsely, just to make the torment cease, the torture might pause, but your fate is sealed. Your confession, extracted under duress, will be used as undeniable proof of your guilt. Your journey will then conclude with a public, brutal execution, often designed to be as agonizing and humiliating as possible: beheading, dismemberment, or crucifixion. Your body might be left publicly displayed as a warning to others, a grim testament to the consequences of defying a daimyo's power. You feel the cold, searing pain, the utter helplessness, and the profound, terrifying knowledge that your secrets, your loyalty, and your very essence are being systematically stripped away. The awful truth about a ninja's life isn't about escaping consequences. It's about the agonizing, almost certain, reality of capture. Your brief, terrifying career culminates in a brutal interrogation designed to break you, followed by a public, agonizing death, ensuring that even in your final moments, your life is defined by the relentless, horrifying grip of feudal justice, a chilling testament to a legal system that sought truth through torment, and where your body became the unwilling instrument of its brutal will. Even if your spirit, miraculously, somehow resisted the agonizing torments of the torture chamber, or if your mission was so discreet that you escaped capture. Your life as a shinobi was defined by a different, more insidious, and utterly pervasive kind of torment identity loss, nameless ghost. Forget knowing who you truly are, or having a personal history. The very essence of your profession demanded the complete erosion of your former self, forcing you to exist as a series of fabricated personas, a phantom moving through the world with no fixed identity, no true name, and no genuine personal history. You quickly learn that to be effective, you must become nobody, turning your very being into a hollow, shifting shell, forever lost in the shadows, your true self slowly, irrevocably, vanishing. It's like living 100 different lives, but none of them are truly yours, and the real you slowly vanishes, leaving only a chilling echo, a phantom existence. You look at your reflection in a still pool of water, or in a polished bronze mirror, and you barely recognize the face staring back. It's a face you've meticulously crafted for your current persona, perhaps a stoic farmer, a genial merchant, or a humble wandering monk. Remember that disguise ordinary appearance from Section 4. The eyes are not your own. They hold the careful blankness of someone trying to hide everything, to reveal no emotion, no recognition, your true name, your family, your past life. All have been systematically erased or buried so deeply that recalling them feels like dredging up a ghost, a faint whisper from a forgotten dream. This isn't just a tactical choice for a mission. It's a profound psychological necessity for survival, but one that comes at an immense personal cost, transforming you into an empty vessel, a tool for your master's will. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with modern notions of self-identity and personal history is that the clandestine nature of a shinobi's life, particularly those who were deeply embedded or lifelong operatives, often necessitated a profound loss of personal identity, as individuals adopted multiple personas, severed ties with their past, and lived under constant deception, leading to severe psychological detachment, chronic loneliness, and a pervasive erosion of their true self for the sake of operational security and ultimate effectiveness. You become a character in someone else's deadly play, forever unable to truly be yourself, even in your most private moments. Imagine the constant mental effort. Every time you adopt a new disguise, you must fully embody that persona. You speak with a different accent, adopt new mannerisms, and internalize a fabricated backstory, a childhood in a different province, a different trade, a different set of experiences. You live the lie so completely, so consistently, that the truth of who you once were begins to fade, replaced by a mosaic of false identities. Your genuine emotions become muted, your true reactions suppressed, replaced by the carefully calculated responses of your current role. You're always acting, always performing, even when you're alone in your safe house, because the habit of concealment becomes so deeply ingrained that you can no longer distinguish the performance from the reality. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects this erosion of self and the organization's deliberate methods is the alleged practice among some shinobi groups of having their recruits undergo symbolic death and rebirth rituals. In these ceremonies, their old identity was ritually discarded, and they were given new, often anonymous, names and a new purpose, cementing their transformation into a loyal, nameless agent. Imagine participating in your own funeral, not because you're dying, but because your old self is being ritually killed off to make you a more effective, emotionless killer, a blank slate for your master's will. Historians still argue whether the extreme psychological detachment and apparent willingness of some shinobi to sacrifice their lives were primarily a direct result of such rigorous indoctrination and ritualistic identity erasure, genuinely transforming their psyche, or if it was simply a coping mechanism for individuals already driven to desperation. Finding a new purpose, however grim, in a collective identity, rather than a total, fundamental loss of self, masking a deep, unspoken pain. Did it create empty vessels, or merely highly dedicated ones? The profound loneliness you experience, remember, isolation trust. No one from the outline. Section 14 in the final script is intrinsically linked to this identity loss. You cannot form genuine relationships because you can never be truly honest about who you are. Every potential friend, every fleeting connection, is a risk, a threat to your carefully constructed deception. You are perpetually a stranger, even to yourself, adrift in a sea of fabricated identities, none of them offering true solace. Your closest companions are often your secrets, and your only confidant is the silence of your own mind. Your past, your family, your childhood memories. Remember that childhood rigor from Section 2. They become ghosts, fleeting echoes from a life you can no longer inhabit, a world from which you're irrevocably severed. You suppress the longing for familiarity, for genuine affection, for the warmth of true human connection, because such emotions are considered weaknesses, vulnerabilities that could compromise your mission or lead to your demise. You exist in a vacuum of your own making, surrounded by the shadows of countless assumed identities, none of them truly yours, all of them disposable. Even your successes are anonymous. There are no public accolades, no medals of honor, no widespread recognition for your deadly craft. Your achievements are known only to your shadowy employer, and perhaps to a few other nameless figures in your organization. You are a silent hand, a forgotten force, your impact felt but never publicly acknowledged. Your heroism, if it can be called that, forever hidden, leaving you with no external validation for your immense sacrifices. You feel the hollowness inside, the constant ache of a self that is no longer clearly defined. Perhaps the profound sadness of a life lived in perpetual performance. You whisper your true name in the dark, wondering if it still belongs to you, if it still holds any meaning, if there's any echo of the person you once were. The awful truth about a ninja's life isn't about dramatic combat or superhuman feats. It's about the soul-crushing reality of identity loss. Your existence is a constant, terrifying performance, where your true self slowly erodes, leaving you a nameless ghost, forever wandering the shadows of a world that knows you only by the fleeting, fabricated faces you wear. A profound and miserable testament to the cost of living a life in perpetual disguise, ensuring that the legacy of the ninja was one of terrifying effectiveness, but immense personal erasure. Even if your soul somehow clung to a sliver of its true identity amidst the constant psychological erosion, your grim reward for a completed mission offered little in the way of lasting comfort. Pay meager, fleeting. Forget vast riches, lavish retirement, or widespread recognition. The monetary compensation for a shinobi's perilous work was often surprisingly poor, unreliable, and quickly spent, providing little lasting security or dignity. You quickly learn that your life is cheaper than you think, and that the few coins in your hand are a constant, chilling reminder of the horrifying risks you've taken, offering no true escape from your miserable, shadow-bound existence. It's like being paid in cursed gold, where every piece you touch brings only temporary relief and a lingering sense of dread. Always just enough to keep you on the edge of survival. You return from a completed mission, perhaps a successful act of sabotage or the delivery of vital intelligence. Remember those core missions from Section 6 slipping back into a hidden safe house or presenting yourself to your shadowy Jonin leader. The initial adrenaline of the task and evasion might still be coursing through your veins, but it quickly dissipates, replaced by the mundane, unglamorous reality of payment. Your employer, perhaps a daimyo's trusted retainer, or a secretive middleman, hands you a small, often unassuming, purse of coins, perhaps a few ryo, or a handful of copper mun. This is your reward for risking your life, for enduring brutal training, Section 3, for living in constant disguise, Section 4, and for quietly undermining an enemy. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with the myth of ninjas growing rich from their kills is that historical shinobi, particularly those operating as specialists for hire or serving specific feudal lords, were often paid relatively modest sums for their dangerous and highly skilled services, which, while more than a common peasant, were rarely enough to guarantee long-term financial security or a lavish lifestyle, often keeping them tied to their perilous profession by necessity. The immense risks involved rarely translated into immense wealth, especially after expenses. Think about it, a life of constant danger and psychological torment, all for a wage that barely keeps you above destitution. Imagine trying to stretch this meager payment. You need food, often bland and basic, as luxury foods were rare. You need a place to sleep, often a cheap, anonymous lodging in a city, or a crude, hidden shelter in the countryside. You need replacement tools if yours were lost or damaged during a mission, those improvised farm tools from Section 5. And you might need new materials for disguises. The few coins quickly dwindle, forcing you to seek out your next assignment, perpetuating the brutal cycle of your existence. There's no pension plan, no sick leave, no guaranteed income. Your survival depends entirely on your next successful, dangerous mission, a particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the pragmatic, yet often morally ambiguous, nature of your payment is that your compensation might not always be in pure coin. It could involve goods stolen during a mission, a promise of future protection or influence, or even valuable intelligence deemed useful to you for a future venture. Imagine being paid in a bolt of silk that you can't sell openly without drawing suspicion, or a secret map of an enemy's fortress that's incredibly useful but brings no immediate food to your table. Historians still argue whether the relatively low pay for shinobi was primarily a reflection of the overall economic realities of feudal Japan, where even highly skilled labor was often poorly compensated unless in direct service to a very wealthy lord, or if it was also a deliberate strategy by their employers to keep shinobi financially dependent and thus more pliable, ensuring their continued service through necessity rather than pure ideological loyalty. Was it market value or calculated control that kept their pay so low? The money you earn, whatever its form, is tainted. It is blood money, acquired through acts of violence, deception, and often murder. You cannot spend it openly in a way that draws attention, lest your sudden wealth attract suspicion or, worse, reveal the true nature of your profession. You spend it cautiously, discreetly, often in the shadows, knowing that every coin is a constant reminder of the risks you've taken and the lives you may have impacted. This taint extends beyond the financial. It's a moral weight that colors every transaction, every interaction, and leaves a lingering sense of unease. The rewards, beyond the immediate payment, are fleeting and insubstantial. A brief sense of accomplishment, perhaps a temporary reprieve from the gnawing hunger or the constant cold. But there's no public recognition, no celebratory fanfare, no lasting legacy beyond the whispered rumors of your deadly effectiveness, or the terrifying legends that spread among your enemies. Your successes are known only to your shadowy employer, and perhaps to a few other nameless figures in your organization, celebrated in secret, and never with true appreciation for the profound human cost. You clutch the few coins in your hand, feeling their meager weight, knowing how quickly they will vanish, and how soon you will need to risk your life again. You look out into the darkness, contemplating the next target, the next infiltration, the next desperate act for survival. The awful truth about a ninja's life isn't about growing rich. It's about the grim reality of their pay. Your compensation is meager, quickly spent on mere subsistence, and forever tainted by the shadows of your deeds, providing no true escape from the misery of your profession. You are condemned to a life where wealth is fleeting, unreliable, and ultimately unable to buy you peace or a release from the relentless, brutal grind of your shadowy existence, ensuring your life is a constant cycle of desperate missions for insufficient reward. Even if your hands are filled with the meager, fleeting pay from a mission, your relationship with your employer is rarely one of simple hire and retain. Instead, your very allegiance is defined by a complex, often brutal reality. Loyalty often forced. Forget unwavering devotion to a noble cause or absolute personal fealty. A shinobi's loyalty was frequently born out of desperation, coercion, or the inescapable bonds of their clan, making their service less about personal choice and more about survival in a brutal, unforgiving world where defiance often meant a swift, terrifying end. You quickly learn that your allegiance isn't a matter of the heart, but a chilling calculus of necessity, and that your life is forever bound by obligations that might feel more like chains than vows. It's like being a highly skilled operative, but your contract is enforced by threats to your family, and stepping out of line means your entire clan might suffer. So you just keep taking the deadly assignments. You receive a new assignment from your Jonin leader, perhaps a particularly dangerous one. You might feel a pang of reluctance, a desire to refuse, but the thought quickly vanishes. Your life, your very existence, is intrinsically linked to your clan or your employer. Perhaps your family's land is tied to their protection, or you owe a profound debt, financial or otherwise, that binds you irrevocably. There's no easy way out, no simple resignation letter. Your loyalty is not just personal, it's a matter of familial and communal survival. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with the myth of fanatical, unquestioning ninja loyalty is that while some shinobi groups were indeed fiercely loyal to specific daimyo feudal lords or clans, this loyalty was often pragmatic, born from economic necessity, protection from rival forces, or long-standing feudal obligations. And in many cases, individuals were coerced into service through threats to their families or communities, rather than solely through ideological conviction or blind devotion. Their allegiance was a complex blend of pragmatism and coercion. Think about it. Your free will means doing exactly what you're told, or everyone you love suffers. Imagine the pressures. You might have been born into a shinobi clan, your destiny predetermined from birth. Your training, remember that hardship, not magic. From Section 3 instills discipline and obedience, but also a profound understanding that your survival depends on the clan's continued existence, which in turn depends on its service to a powerful lord. If your clan falls, you fall with it. This collective identity, while offering some protection, also binds you inescapably. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the coercive side of recruitment and how deep the loyalty chain went is the historical practice of shinobi clans often acting as mercenaries, selling their services to various daimyo. This meant that a shinobi might find themselves fighting against a lord they previously served, or even against former comrades who were now employed by a rival. This fluid allegiance, dictated by whoever paid or coerced the most, made loyalty a very practical and sometimes contradictory concept, highlighting that the ultimate loyalty was often to the survival of the clan, rather than a specific lord's banner. Imagine working for two rival companies in the same week, and both expect your absolute, unwavering dedication, but you just follow the money. Historians still argue whether the shinobi's often shifting allegiances and pragmatic approach to loyalty primarily reflected a cynical, amoral approach to warfare, driven purely by survival and financial gain, or if it was an adaptive strategy for marginalized groups in a chaotic, unpredictable feudal landscape, ensuring their survival by being indispensable to various warring factions, making their betrayals less about personal treachery and more about the ultimate survival of their clan or their own lives. Was it amorality or pure pragmatism that dictated their shifting loyalties? If you were a common farmer or a Ronin masterless samurai coerced into service, the threats could be direct. Your family's village might be vulnerable to raids if you refuse. Your past debts could be called in, condemning you to prison or worse. The choice presented to you is often between a life of extreme danger as a shinobi and a swift, brutal end for you or your loved ones. This kind of loyalty is born of desperation, not conviction. The psychological toll of forced loyalty is immense. You might find yourself performing missions for a lord you despise or against people you respect. Your conscience, if you have one left after the identity loss, we'll discuss in Section 9, is constantly battling against the grim necessities of your duties. You live a double life, your true feelings hidden even from yourself, ensuring your obedience through sheer force of will or self-deception. The risk of betrayal, which we'll cover in Section 14, also constantly tests your loyalty. Your employer might decide you know too much, or a rival might offer a better deal, tempting you to switch sides. The bonds holding your allegiance are constantly under strain, making trust a dangerous concept in your world. You feel the cold weight of the obligations, the gnawing anxiety that comes with every assignment, and the subtle resentment that festers beneath your outward compliance. You serve, you obey, you kill, not always out of conviction, but often because you simply have no other choice. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about romantic loyalty. It's about the brutal reality of forced allegiance. Your life is consumed by a complex web of obligations, transforming your sacred duty into a constant battle against coercion, ensuring that the heavy price of your dangerous profession was paid not just in physical peril, but in profound internal conflict and a chilling lack of personal freedom. A constant reminder that even your very will was often not your own, but dictated by the harsh necessities of survival in a brutal, unforgiving world. Even if your forced loyalty kept you from outright defiance, ensuring your continued, meager pay, your life as a shinobi was profoundly shaped by another, perhaps even more insidious, burdened social status, despised outcasts. Forget the awe and respect of cinematic legends. In feudal Japan, the shinobi, if their true nature was even suspected, were universally feared, scorned, and ostracized by mainstream society, viewed as dishonorable, untrustworthy, and utterly outside the rigid moral codes of the samurai. You quickly learn that your effectiveness depends on your invisibility, because if your true identity is known, you become a pariah, condemned by the very society you secretly serve, turning your profession into a life sentence of perpetual contempt and profound isolation. It's like being a highly skilled, incredibly effective, but utterly despised secret agent, where if your cover is blown, everyone treats you worse than a common criminal, and your very existence is considered a mark of shame. You move through the bustling streets of a Japanese town, or perhaps stand near a castle gate. Your disguise, remember that, ordinary appearance from Section 4 impeccable. You might overhear a conversation between samurai, or common folk, speaking in hushed, fearful tones about the ninja. They use terms like shadow people, demons of the night, or unclean ones. They tell exaggerated tales of your supposed mystical powers. Recall that shadowy myths intro. Section 1 and Monsters and Superstition from the Explorer script. Section 9. How Fear Breeds Myth, painting a picture of something terrifying and inhuman. You realize that while your effectiveness breeds fear, it does not breed respect. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the popular myth of ninjas as revered or cool figures is that historical shinobi, when their covert activities were revealed or suspected, were universally regarded as dishonorable, treacherous, and utterly despicable by the samurai class who adhered to strict codes of Bushido, and were feared and shunned by the common populace, placing them at the very bottom of the social hierarchy and making them social outcasts with no legitimate standing. Their methods defied the strict moral and social codes of feudal Japan, earning them widespread scorn. Think about it. Your profession makes you lower than a beggar in the eyes of society. Imagine the casual contempt you face if your true identity were known. A samurai would never treat you as an honorable opponent. You would be seen as vermin, to be eradicated mercilessly, not engaged in fair combat. Your life, if caught, would be forfeit, and your death would be dishonorable. Without the rituals or respect afforded to a samurai, recall that trial and hanging grim justice from the pirate script. Section 12. Ninja deaths were often equally, if not more, brutal and public if caught. The methods you employ: stealth, deception, poisoning, sabotage. Remember those from Sections 6 and 7 were considered utterly ignoble, violating every code of Bushido. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates this profound disdain is the common samurai practice of openly scorning shinobi tactics, even when they were effective. Samurai chronicles might briefly mention the use of shinobi, often in derogatory terms, but they rarely celebrated their skills or acknowledged their pivotal contributions to victory, preferring to focus on honorable, open combat. Imagine your military leaders winning a battle because of your secret intelligence. But then they publicly pretend your contributions didn't exist because they were dishonorable. Historians still argue whether the extreme social ostracism and disdain for shinobi was primarily a deliberate strategy by the ruling samurai class to delegitimize and control individuals who operated outside their rigid social and moral hierarchy, preventing them from gaining too much influence or forming rival power bases. Or if it was a genuine reflection of a deeply ingrained cultural abhorrence for their deceptive and unclean methods, seen as a threat to the very fabric of an honor-bound society. Was it about control or genuine disgust that defined their low status, the secrecy of your life? Remember identity loss. Nameless ghost from Section 9 is not just for operational security, it's also a shield against this widespread contempt. You live in the shadows not only to protect your mission, but to avoid the scorn of the world. Your inability to form genuine social bonds tying into the isolation trust no one from the outline. Section 9 is exacerbated by the fact that even if you could reveal your true self, you would be immediately shunned. Your family. If they are known to be associated with shinobi activities, remember, family life danger, secrecy, from Section 13 in the outline, might also face social ostracism, their marriage prospects limited, their children treated with suspicion. The stigma of your profession extends to your lineage, a heavy burden that is passed down through generations. You are born into a despised class, a mark that is almost impossible to erase. Even your pay, meager and fleeting from Section 10, reflects your low status. You're paid just enough to be useful, but not enough to elevate yourself into respected society. Your value is purely transactional, your loyalty often forced. From Section 11 is bought, and your contributions, however vital, are rarely celebrated openly. You feel the cold weight of societal scorn, the pervasive sense of being an outsider, an unclean one. You move through crowds, unnoticed, unacknowledged, precisely because your very effectiveness demands your invisibility. You hear the whispers of fear and disgust from the common folk, and you understand that your existence is viewed as a necessary evil, a dark shadow that aids the powerful but is never truly accepted. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about dramatic combat. It's about the brutal reality of their social status. Your life is consumed by pervasive contempt and profound isolation, transforming your highly skilled, incredibly dangerous profession into a life sentence of being a despised outcast, ensuring that the legendary stealth and cunning of the ninja were perpetually overshadowed by the crushing reality of social shame and constant revulsion. A grim and poignant reminder of the true price of operating beyond the strict, honor-bound rules of feudal Japanese society. Even if you, as a shinobi, endured the pervasive social scorn and the constant burden of identity loss, your profession cast its longest, darkest shadow not on your public life, but on your most intimate sphere. Family life danger, secrecy. Forget the warmth of a stable household or the simple joy of open relationships. Your chosen or forced path in the shadows meant a domestic existence defined by profound secrecy, constant fear, frequent separation, and the chilling knowledge that your very presence, or your true identity, could bring brutal consequences upon your loved ones. You quickly learn that love here is a dangerous vulnerability, and that protecting your family means perpetually keeping them in the dark, turning your home into a place of hidden anxieties and unspoken terrors. It's like living in a house where everyone has a terrifying secret. And the biggest one is you. And if it ever gets out, everyone you love suffers or dies. You return to your humble dwelling, perhaps a secluded farmstead nestled in a remote valley, far from prying eyes. Your wife greets you, her face etched with weariness, but also a quiet understanding. Your children play nearby, innocent of the true nature of your travels or long absences. The longhouse, or simple farmhouse, feels like a fragile bubble of normalcy, constantly threatened by the unseen dangers that define your double life. The air, though familiar, is always tinged with a subtle tension, a constant undercurrent of unspoken fear. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with any notion of peaceful domesticity for shinobi is that the clandestine and dangerous nature of the shinobi's profession inflicted immense hardship on their families, requiring profound secrecy, leading to frequent and prolonged absences, risking family abandonment, and placing loved ones at constant risk of persecution, torture, or death, should the shinobi's true identity or activities be uncovered. Family life was perpetually precarious and shadowed by extreme peril. Think about it. Your biggest secret could be a death sentence for your spouse and children. Imagine the pervasive secrecy. You cannot tell your wife the true nature of your missions, those spying and sabotage tasks. Remember from Section 6, you cannot explain your long absences, your sudden disappearances, or the strange scars on your body. You live a lie within your own home, constantly creating plausible cover stories for your family, hoping they don't ask too many questions. This constant deception creates a profound emotional distance, even with those you love most. You watch your wife's worried glances, her unspoken anxieties, and you are powerless to truly reassure her, for the truth itself is too dangerous. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the extreme measures taken to protect families and the brutal logic behind them is the alleged practice among some shinobi clans of having members undergo harsh physical conditioning. Remember that. From Section 3, Hardship, not magic, that specifically taught them to resist torture and to quickly commit suicide if captured, explicitly to protect their families from repercussions. Imagine signing up for a job where part of your training is literally how to kill yourself quickly and silently, just so your wife and kids aren't tortured to death if you get caught. Historians still argue whether the extreme secrecy and compartmentalization of shinobi clan activities, which undoubtedly protected families to some extent by limiting knowledge, inadvertently contributed to a more isolated and psychologically burdened family unit, where the lack of shared understanding and constant fear created deep, unspoken anxieties that ultimately strained familial bonds despite the intention of protection. Did it protect them? Or just make them more secretly miserable? The constant fear for your family's safety is a crushing weight. Every time you leave for a mission, you know it could be your last. If you are caught, or your activities are exposed, your family faces brutal retaliation. They could be tortured. Recall that grim reality from Section 8, Capture, Torture, and Death, often to extract information about you, exiled, or even executed, simply for being related to a shinobi. This constant threat permeates your domestic life, transforming your love into a source of profound vulnerability, forcing you to maintain an emotional distance to protect them from the terrible consequences of your true profession. Your absences are long and frequent. Remember those men's absence raids and trade from Viking family life. Section 5. You might be gone for weeks or months on a reconnaissance mission or an infiltration attempt. Your wife is left to manage the household alone. Often struggling with limited resources, recall those meager, fleeting payments from Section 10. Battling hunger and disease as we discussed in Viking family life. Sections 6 and 7, which were pervasive threats for any medieval family. The physical and emotional burden on her is immense, as she lives in constant uncertainty, never knowing if you will return. The lack of normal social life adds to the isolation. You cannot openly participate in village festivals or community gatherings without risking exposure. Your family must maintain a low profile, their lives often defined by discretion and subtle avoidance of too much attention. This isolation, while ensuring security, also deprives your family of the warmth and support of a broader community. Your children grow up in a world of secrets. They might never truly know what their father does, or why he is so often absent, or why he carries such a guarded expression. Their childhoods, already brutal and short in feudal Japan, are shadowed by unspoken anxieties, a pervasive sense that their family is different, set apart by a terrifying secret. You feel the profound ache of loneliness, the constant weight of your deception, and the terrifying knowledge that your very love puts your family in mortal peril. You watch your children play, their innocence a stark contrast to the darkness that defines your life, and you know that every smile, every hug, is a precious moment that could be shattered by the revealing of your true identity. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about dramatic combat. It's about the brutal reality of family life. Your profession consumes your domestic existence, forcing you to live a life of profound secrecy and constant fear, transforming your closest bonds into a source of immense vulnerability, ensuring that the heavy price of your dangerous career was paid not just in your own suffering, but in the pervasive anxiety, unspoken burdens, and constant peril that shadowed the lives of those you loved most, making their very existence a grim testament to the profound human cost of your chosen path. Even if your family somehow remained safe from the direct perils of your clandestine life, and you maintained your precarious existence amidst the pervasive social scorn, your world as a shinobi was constantly poisoned by another, more insidious, and utterly soul-crushing reality: betrayal, constant threat. Forget unwavering loyalty to your clan or the honor among shadowy figures. Your profession was a viper's nest of shifting alliances, brutal double crosses, and the ever-present danger of being sold out by the very people you served, by rival shinobi, or even by desperate kin. You quickly learn that trust is a fatal luxury, and that your greatest enemy might not be an obvious opponent, but a smiling ally or a shadowy employer, all eager to gain favor or avoid ruin by sacrificing you. It's like being perpetually trapped in a very deadly, very complex game of Clue, but everyone is a potential murderer, and the only way to win is to expose someone else before they expose you, or eliminate you. You receive a new assignment, perhaps from your jonin leader, or directly from a daimyo you serve. The details seem straightforward, the objective clear, but a subtle unease gnaws at you, a familiar chill of suspicion. Perhaps the mission feels too easy, or the escape route seems suspiciously obvious. Your brutal training has instilled in you a deep sense of paranoia. Remember that. Isolation, trust no one, from Section 9. A constant vigilance that now serves as your only true companion, because you know that in your world, loyalty is a fleeting commodity, bought and sold like any other. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with romantic notions of unbreakable ninja brotherhoods is that historical shinobi, due to the clandestine and high-stakes nature of their work, faced a constant threat of betrayal, both from their employers who might eliminate them to tie up loose ends or avoid payment, from rival shinobi clans, or from desperate individuals seeking bounties, making trust virtually impossible and ensuring a life of pervasive suspicion. Your very existence was a constant gamble on others' shifting allegiances. Think about it. If you're willing to kill for money, why wouldn't someone else be willing to betray you for it? Imagine the myriad forms betrayal could take. Your employer, a powerful daimyo, having utilized your deadly services, might decide you know too much, or that your continued existence is a liability that could expose his illicit activities. A sudden, unexpected attack by your own master's guards, disguised as a common ambush, might be the first chilling indication that your usefulness has run its course, and you are now a loose end to be tied up, or perhaps your payment. Remember those Meager, fleeting earnings from Section 10 is never delivered, and the safe house you expected to find is empty. Or worse, a trap set by those who hired you. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the ruthless calculus of such betrayals is the alleged practice of having dead man switches, or prearranged signals that would automatically expose an employer's involvement if the shinobi was captured and failed to return by a specific time, creating a perverse incentive for the employer to ensure the shinobi's clean escape, or at least his silence. Imagine your only insurance policy against betrayal being a secret message that condemns your employer if you die, hoping it provides enough leverage to keep you alive, or at least ensure a swift, clean death. Historians still argue whether the frequency of betrayals among shinobi and their employers was primarily a direct consequence of the overall ruthlessness and lack of ethical constraints in feudal Japanese political intrigue. Where any means justified, the end recall, how Roman politics was a horrifying business. Section 14, where ambition led to similar betrayals, or if it was an inevitable byproduct of the inherent secrecy and lack of formal legal recourse within clandestine organizations, making self-preservation the ultimate driving force for all parties, often leading to a constant cycle of suspicion and preemptive elimination. Was it about pure power, or the fundamental instability of an outlaw life that made betrayal so common? Internal betrayal from fellow shinobi or members of your own clan is another chilling threat. Perhaps a rival within your own ranks seeks to gain favor by exposing your weaknesses or even eliminating you. Or a captured comrade, broken under brutal torture. Remember Section 8. Capture, torture, and death might give up your identity or your location to save themselves, turning you into a target overnight. The strict compartmentalization of information, where operatives knew only what was absolutely necessary, which contributed to identity loss. Section 9 was designed to limit the damage from betrayal, but it could never eliminate it entirely. Then there are external betrayals. A local informant, a disgruntled merchant you crossed, or even a desperate citizen might recognize you from a wanted poster despite your perfect disguise, or simply suspect your true nature and turn you over to the authorities for a reward. The bounty on your head, offered by a daimyo you angered or whose plans you thwarted, is a powerful incentive for anyone seeking to escape poverty or gain favor. You live in a state of perpetual distrust. Every new face is scrutinized. Every seemingly friendly gesture is analyzed for ulterior motives. Every piece of information shared is weighed for its potential to be used against you. Your mind, already strained by paranoia and constant vigilance, becomes even more hyper-alert, questioning everyone and everything. You might keep multiple escape routes from every safe house, multiple identities, and multiple contingency plans, knowing that the most dangerous enemy is often the one you least expect, wearing a familiar face, wielding a smile that conceals a dagger. You feel the cold dread of suspicion, the tightening in your gut when a supposed ally's words ring hollow, or when an unexpected figure appears in a location where only your closest contacts should know. You prepare for the worst, knowing that your life is a constant game of cat and mouse. And sometimes, the cat is one of your own kind. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan isn't about dramatic combat. It's about the pervasive, chilling reality of betrayal. Your existence is a constant, agonizing struggle against being sold out. A perpetual dance with treachery where your only guarantee is that eventually, someone, somewhere, will try to cash in on your life, making trust the most dangerous gamble of all in your miserable, shadowy existence. a heavy and unavoidable price for your fleeting power. After enduring the brutal realities of your origins as a farmer or low-ranking samurai, the grueling training that hardened your body and mind, the constant peril of maintaining your ordinary disguise and infiltrating enemy lines, the practical and often crude nature of your weaponry, the demanding covert missions of spying and sabotage, the agonizing slowness of true stealth, the terrifying certainty of torture and death if captured, the profound psychological toll of identity loss, the meager and fleeting pay for your dangerous work, the complex and often forced nature of your loyalty, the pervasive social scorn that branded you an outcast, and the chilling reality of constant betrayal from within and without. You finally emerge from our journey through the shinobi's life to confront its complex and enduring legacy myth versus misery, the romanticized image of the silent, superhuman ninja. Leaping across rooftops and serving a noble cause is a captivating fantasy. But the awful truth of the historical shinobi's existence was a relentless grind of fear, pain, suffering, and a near certain, miserable end. A stark contrast between legend and reality. You realize that the very allure of the ninja myth is built upon a deliberate historical omission, overlooking the grim, often horrifying truths of a life consumed by violence and shadows. It's like looking at a beautifully painted portrait and realizing that beneath the oils and colors, there's a canvas stretched over a skeleton. You reflect on the vivid contrasts. The cinematic ninja, agile beyond belief and utterly untraceable, contrasts sharply with the historical reality of painstaking, agonizingly slow stealth, arduous disguises, and the immense difficulty of evading capture. Remember those frantic escapes from Section 8's Capture, Torture, and Death, or the escape treacherous, relentless from our medieval assassin script. The idea of unwavering loyalty to a mysterious brotherhood stands against the pervasive paranoia and constant threat of betrayal, both internal and external from Section 14. The glamorous, well-paid killer of fiction crumbles under the weight of meager, blood-stained wages from Section 10, barely enough for subsistence. The iconic black outfit, mostly a later theatrical invention, far from the drab. Peasant clothing actually worn recall disguise ordinary appearance from Section 4. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this chasm between legend and reality is that while historical shinobi did exist and perform crucial roles in feudal Japanese warfare, primarily intelligence, sabotage, and unconventional tactics, their lives were far from romanticized, characterized by extreme danger, short lifespans, brutal training, constant psychological strain, profound social ostracism, and often a lack of personal autonomy, a stark deviation from their modern mythologized portrayal. Their effectiveness stemmed from ruthlessness, discipline, and strategic pragmatism, not superhuman abilities or mystical powers. Think about it. Your idea of a thrilling ninja adventure probably doesn't involve spending weeks hiding in a ditch, eating stale rice, and being terrified of getting bitten by a snake. Imagine the popular stories you've heard the master of the hidden blade katana, the silent phantom, the ultimate freedom fighter operating in the shadows. These tales conveniently forget the overwhelming physical discomfort, the constant diseases even without being on a ship. As we saw in the Viking family life, Section 6, the Longhouse, was a disease hotbed, and shinobi were even more exposed, the agonizing injuries, and the sheer monotony of living perpetually on the run or in hiding. They don't dwell on the profound loneliness and the erosion of one's identity from Section 9. or the gnawing moral ambiguity and guilt which contributes to the psychological toll from Section 14 that haunted the real figures who performed these grim tasks. The glamour of the ninja star shuriken conveniently ignores the fact that most ninja weapons were adapted farm tools from Section 5, and true throwing stars were rarely used as lethal weapons. A particularly quirky tidbit that exemplifies this myth-making is how the very word ninja itself entered widespread popular usage much later, largely through exaggerated Edo period folklore, pulp fiction, and kabuki theater that sensationalized their exploits, and then exploded into global pop culture in the 20th century. Historical accounts often use the more generic term shinobi. Imagine a historical figure whose entire global fame is based on exaggerated bedtime stories and action movies from centuries after they died. Historians still argue whether the persistent romanticization of shinobi in popular culture, from literature to video games, is primarily a manifestation of a universal human fascination with rebellion against authority and the allure of hidden, subversive power, allowing us to project our own desires for freedom and control onto a dangerous past. Or if it's simply a more palatable way to consume stories of violence by stripping away the grim reality and profound moral complexity of historical figures who performed murder, espionage, and sabotage for political or personal gain, making it a sanitized, digestible narrative. Is it about fascination or sanitization that perpetuates the myth? The golden age of the ninja, if it can be called that, was ultimately a desperate, fleeting response to the brutal chaos of the Sengoku period. It was crushed by the consolidation of power under the Tokugawa shogunate, who brought an end to constant warfare and thus eliminated the primary demand for shinobi. Those who survived often found themselves without purpose, forced to abandon their skills or live out their days in obscurity. You stand now, perhaps a little more enlightened, perhaps a little more disturbed. By the contrast, the beautiful cinematic leaps of faith dissolve into the reality of muddy fields, lurking samurai, primitive tools, and painful ends. The awful truth about ninjas in feudal Japan is precisely what makes the myth so potent. It is the darkness, the misery, and the sheer human cost that provides the chilling backdrop to a legend that continues to enthrall us, forever linking the glamorous fantasy with its horrifying, bloody reality, reminding us that even the most legendary figures often lived incredibly difficult and unglamorous lives. Now, as the shadows of feudal Japanese castles fade and the whispers of hidden daggers grow quiet, let the stillness of your room embrace you. The brutal training, the constant fear, the identity loss, and the profound misery of a shinobi's life are safely in the past, part of a history that now dissolves into the gentle hum of your fan. You've journeyed through a world where even legendary figures lived utterly brutal lives. And now, it's time for you to find your own peaceful rest. Let your mind unwind, your muscles relax, and sink into a deep, undisturbed sleep, far from the terrible truths of the ninja's shadow. End of script. Sweet dreams.